Hey guys, alright, just before the show starts, I wanted to let you guys know that my fight against cancel culture is still happening. Please go to the description below. There's a link titled Support My Fight Against Cancel Culture. If you want to help my fight, please consider giving a bit of a donation. All the information's in that link. With that being said, enjoy the show. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Let's Talk, a show where we talk about interesting things with interesting people. Now, tonight is going to be an interesting one, as you guys can see by the title, The Life of a Lapsed Communist. So that's going to be fun to talk about. But before we get into it, I just want to say, ladies and gentlemen, those of you that are new to my channel, or maybe you've just come across it, please consider subscribing. It would be much appreciated. And don't forget to give this video a like. Speaking of which, I see there's already a dislike, so I guess the trolls are up early today, or, starting their shift early, so that's fine. So we've already got Count Vontenkampf is here saying evening all, and JC McFarlane saying good evening. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. All right, so for those of you who may not know, my guest tonight is Rob, also known as Marhobane. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. That's his YouTube channel as well. So please, there's a link in the description. Go subscribe. He's a historian, if I can put it that way. I don't think he would classify himself as a historian, but he talks about history basically a lot on his channel, and he's got some other things going on. And you've seen him before on my channel as well. I'm sure you've seen him in other interviews. So. Do you want to give yourself a bit of an introduction?
Yeah, I mean, I guess. Well, I mean, look, before calling me a historian, my videos are on history. I would say that there's actually a technical term for this kind of stuff. You call them popular historians, because then they don't have to be like very advanced academics. They're just telling popular histories of things. And I mean, I don't know. I think even if it's a bit middlebrow, it's good that people do it, because there's this big gap between highbrow intellectual history and sort of ordinary people remembering their lives, and trying to bridge the gap between the two is kind of difficult. And so I'm hoping to do a bit of that.
Cool.
And but my background is well, my academic background really is I've got a master's in this very weird degree called crisis and security management. And it's I took it because it's like somewhere between international relations and public relations, but for dealing with things like earthquakes, pandemics, terrorism, policing, things like that. And so I did my thesis on drug policy enforcement, drug prohibition enforcement. Yeah, no, that's the shape of my stuff. But I did philosophy at undergrad, so I write a lot about philosophy in my blog. So yeah.
I was wondering where the philosophy fell in, because
Yeah.
the other stuff is like, huh? But cool, man. All right, so let's get right into the topic at hand, which is the life of a lapsed communist. I've seen a few of your interviews where you've mentioned that you used to be on, I guess some would consider the far left. I mean, you said you used to be a commie, and that took me by surprise when I heard you say that. And ever since I heard you say it, I was like, what happened? Why? Like, I wouldn't say that you are right now.
Oh no, look, I am right wing, but I have my own I have my own idea about what defines right wing. I mean, look, for most people, there's this one-dimensional spectrum, and on the one end is Adolf Hitler, and on the other end is Joseph Stalin.
Yeah, pretty much.
And it's like, that's not how things work. I mean, you got to remember there were plenty of right-wingers like Friedrich Reck and Ernst Junger and all of these people, very right-wing Germans who at the time thought Hitler was an absolute barbarian of absolutely unconscionable moral quality. And so the idea that Adolf Hitler represents the right, I think it's an extraordinary defamation, and a lot of it sort of stems out of Soviet propaganda through most of the 20th century, which had influenced people. People have no idea how strong an influence the Soviet Union had on how people remember things, because their supporters were very large amongst academia. I mean, to the point that in the 1970s when the Khmer Rouge took over Cambodia, every single academic who knew anything about Cambodia wrote absolutely gushing praise about how perfect the regime would be until they got deposed and it was obvious what they had done. I mean, there's a guy, I can't remember his bloody name, geographer, I think, Marxist, who went over to Cambodia to try and be chummy with the new utopian revolution. They killed him. And I mean, there's a modern Cambodian historian called Sofal. Yeah, and I remember on Twitter you were asking for experts on genocide, and I wanted you to contact him because he
Yes.
has a following that's in like the low thousands, so you might be able to get his attention. And he wrote a paper called the come on, please remember, Standard Academic View on Cambodia, which is about this whole period where like all of these big name intellectuals, including Noam Chomsky, basically ran defense for them by trying to discredit anyone who is criticizing them. It's an absolutely extraordinary period of history, and I mean this is normal. I mean, look, this is kind of the thing. If you're a communist, you've got this dream in your head that someday someone will do real socialism.
Well, that's the thing, and also like I want to make my stance also clear because so you said you used to be a commie. I really want to know what changed your mind, all that stuff. I used to consider myself quite a liberal, left. I wouldn't say far left. I would say like, I mean, I think up until maybe 2 years ago, I started to really look at the definitions again and start to discover like, okay, so I'm yeah, maybe centrist, or I do have right-leaning ideologies, but I'm definitely, I did that Google compass, what's it, political compass
those
thing.
things are nonsense. Don't trust those for a second. And anyone who takes them seriously. Also remember that
Well,
they
apparently
sell
I'm
on
center,
your
like dead
data.
center.
Also remember that they sell on your data, so all of those questions that you're answering,
Yeah,
somebody somewhere in the other end of the world is logging them onto a database somewhere. So
that's fine.
I mean, look, I filled out a couple of in the past, so I don't know what that means for me. But just to let everyone else know, in case you're feeling paranoid, but look, the thing that changed it for me was you got to understand, like most people buy into the sort of general idea of progress that the left has, where the closer you get to sharing resources and reducing inequality and helping people out and all of this kind of stuff, it's all about compassion and sharing the load. And there's parasitic people aren't pulling their weight up at the top, and they don't really earn what they own.
Yeah.
And opportunity, making equality of opportunity, all of these nice things that, like, I think pretty much everyone thinks, well, that sounds nice. That sounds really good. I'm going to have more of that. I don't want to be mean to people. But, I mean, you have to think about what the actual consequences of this stuff is. I mean, like a mother who's afraid to chastise their child turns him into a monster. And it's I mean, I know this is not a strictly direct analogy, parenthood and running a state. But there are some parallels in that ordinary people do actually need the pressure of survival in order to form life skills. And I think just sort of the feeling of independence and being able to get your stuff in order requires actual practice and pressure from life. Because young people, and you need to get it right young, because the older you get, the harder it is to learn all of those life skills.
Yep.
But all of that nonsense aside, there's this idea of what's good and what's progress, what counts as progress in life. And most of it is centered around the idea of democracy. Everyone knows democracy is a good thing, so you've got to have more of it everywhere, all the time. Everything must be more democratic. And I think the way that the left actually the nature of the left is defined by this reverence of democracy as the ultimate virtue, that the man is the measure of all things. And you think, well, that sounds innocuous because democracy is better than autocracy, and you can kind of go, well, yes, but democracy is a general principle about where authority lies. And what happens is that so the best place to start, actually, it's very academic and everything, but there's an essay by Karl Marx from his early days when he was a young guy, and it's called On Hegel's Philosophy of Right. And Hegel had this big fat essay where he argued that, human freedom is produced through a struggle of competing powers and influences and opinions that gradually synthesize it together until you get to what he sort of saw as freedom was when all classifications that prevented people from achieving political office or voting were removed. And so that sounds fine. That sounds like liberal democracy, like what we had since the 90s everywhere in the world. Well, not everywhere, but you know what I mean. And Karl Marx responds and he goes, no, because there's still inequalities in society that alienate people from power and from the state. Because you're not a bureaucrat, you're not a wealthy industrialist, you're not a member of the clergy, you're not a shopkeeper, all of these different things that create divisions of power and influence in society. He says, well, they have to be dissolved in order to reach a pure democracy, and a pure democracy will dissolve the state. And this is before he writes the Communist Manifesto. This is before he writes all of those things. And he says, well, if you have pure direct democracy, and you can see this in the anarchists today as well, you can see it in all of these utopian people who talk about direct democracy. Whether they're sitting on the right or the left, they are on the left in a very, very serious way. The left is a bigger movement towards this really weird utopian flattening of all rules, all hierarchies, all institutions. And the fact is that rules, hierarchies, and institutions actually keep people safe and allow them to have some degree of security and permanence in their lives. And security and permanence are some of the most important things. If your society is constantly changing, then everything is insecure, and the only thing that rules is raw power. And that's, in fact, what happens when people have revolutions, is they dissolve all of the hierarchies and rules and institutions, and the most brutal, bloodthirsty man in town takes all the power. And that's why when you look at, Marxist revolutions, or any revolution for that matter, it's always the bastards who win. Always. You never get non-bastards winning a revolution. So what you sort of have a look at with this thing that you learn as a South African, particularly if you grew up in South Africa, everything you learn in school is, the struggle was good, revolutionary violence is justified, everything's about democracy and equality and all of this kind of stuff, and it's very sacred because there's a pure evil taboo that associates any form of inequality with racism, any form of sort of difference and discrimination as racial discrimination. So the very idea that discriminating between shit and shinola even, is considered a bad idea. No discrimination, no difference. To the point where you're talking about, and you can read it when you go back to the old UDF and ANC policies from the late middle 20th century, 70s and 80s. They talk about schooling and they say, well, standards and marks are oppressive and everyone should get the same guaranteed pass. They're saying that shit back then. So now you're looking at all the 20%ers. That was the plan from the get-go. The thing is, you look at the Freedom Charter, and there was always like a nagging feeling in my gut when I looked at all these radical ideas that they had. And I sort of thought, well, if they really did that, it might not actually be so good. Maybe we should just be really slow and reformist. So I really did believe in this kind of thing of like, well, eventually we'll get to communism, but you have to ask people's permission because it's democracy. And so any reform that was leftward was good. And it's sort of like, you do the calculation in your head and you look at the economic effects of even people who instituted socialist policies democratically and through the rule of law. It has a negative effect on the country. I mean, look at Zimbabwe. all of the policies that they passed. I mean, look, you can talk about how thuggish and brutal the dominant party system in Zimbabwe is, but there's no essential. They still had a lot of inherited institutions from old Rhodesia, and they had a free press, more or less, for most of their post-liberation history, and they had a free judiciary and so on. And still, all the reforms go through, and everyone says, well, it's written in law, so has to be. All those like really stupid population movements where they're packing up thousands of people and moving them across the country and playing silly shenanigans with the wage controls and everything, and the country just ate itself over decades until eventually, to get rid of the debt, because it's deficit spending. So in order to deal with the deficit spending, they print money, and then they go the same way as Hungary and Germany and Turkey before them.
Exactly.
And but the thing is, what really changed my mind was not looking at all of these facts, because you learn how to ignore them as a lefty. Because one thing, ideology directs you to look at different facts as well.
That's something. All right, so I'm going to stop. I'm sorry. I'm going to stop you there because I'm glad you said that, because we find that a lot when you speak to a lefty, right? That you say, okay, cool, but look at what happened to Russia. That was full on commie, failed, broke, like people died, and it's almost like they just refuse. Explain that mentality.
Here's the frame. I'll tell you why it doesn't work on them. Because if you're a Marxist or any other kind of socialist, even a Fabian socialist, although there's not many of them anymore, almost everyone's sort of like some variety of Marxist, even if they don't think they are. What they generally say is that the concept of capitalism describes everything that isn't socialism.
Okay.
So what they do is they ascribe a death toll to all the wars that have occurred and all of the famines and everything that has occurred since the end of the feudal period in like the late 18th century. So every act of violence that's been committed outside of the Soviet Union and its allies between 1891 and today is deaths due to capitalism. And you can see how bizarre that is, because the sheer variety of institutions and economic policies and political movements and religious movements and all this kind of stuff that happened during this time, it's absolutely extraordinary variety of political ideas and systems. But they lump them all under capitalism because they created this special idea to encompass everything that isn't paradise.
So any like all the world wars are considered capitalist.
Yeah, it's due to capitalism. Yeah, that's how they think of it.
So that we had so there's two world wars. What about the other wars, like the Vietnam War, also in that category?
Yes.
Okay, and what about let me make it a little bit more specific. The Gulf War in Egypt, would they consider that a capitalism? What?
Yes.
That had nothing to do with capitalism. It had nothing at all.
Did it involve the United States?
No.
Wait. The Gulf War.
The Gulf War, the Suez Canal. Yeah, that was England.
What, 1990, where America invaded Kuwait?
No, not that war. There's another war in Egypt. It was between the Egyptians and I think I don't know, neighboring country. It had nothing to do with the States.
No, but I mean, if it's not socialist, I mean, look, the thing is that a lot of people will look at the Arab nationalist movements and the way that they structured their government as being socialist influenced, and a lot of them were. I mean, you can even look at the Ba'ath Party, and what they were doing is heavily influenced by the Soviet Union, and they were trying to sort of play both sides for a long time during the Cold War. And so you get a lot of this kind of stuff, but in the Arab nationalist governments, whether you're talking about Sadat or Saddam or any of those buggers.
Yeah. Hosni Mubarak was one of
them.
So he like.
Yeah, I mean, you guys, your military owns like half the economy or whatever. It's very weird.
So like that war is like there's a lot of countries that have a Gulf War. So I understand the confusion. In that war, it wasn't. There were people that told me America funded it.
Yeah, well, they did.
Yeah, but it wasn't
So then
between.
it's a war of imperial aggression. You understand? That's how you got to. It's very absolute with them. If you have any private property in your country, you know, you're a capitalist. Unless they really need, unless you're using the country like Venezuela. Of course, there was some private property and some private enterprise, but because they were openly calling themselves socialist, they're already like a new thing, and they were trying collectivization, which means starvation. But I mean, but dude, you could watch it in real time. If you were reading those headlines in 2013, like everyone was like, "Oh my God, Venezuela!" Like the Guardian was like, "Oh, the miracle of Venezuela, now they're uplifting the poor," and
Never
like,
happened.
bruh, and the
There's
and
a
then
South
like a
African
year,
coming
like
out.
dude, like a couple of months change, and you can just see like all of the guys who were going, Chavez, amazing. They just look dead silent.
Yeah, but
There's
then
no more Venezuelan news on the Guardian, and all of the Venezuelan news is now on the
but then
not the New York
they use
Times,
the
the Wall Street
excuse
Journal.
of oh, this wasn't real socialism. This wasn't
Yes,
real
of course.
communism.
But
We need to give it another try.
that
We
comes
failed.
out like. Yeah, but that usually takes like 6 months to a year,
Mm.
because what they do is they wait for the real like hardcore radicals to bicker amongst themselves about why everything went wrong.
Mm.
And then the sort of moderate lefties who are in the mainstream will sort of be paying attention to like Jacobin magazine.
Mm.
I almost said Jacobite magazine, but that is a very different kettle of fish. Have you ever read them?
No, I
Go
haven't,
ahead.
but I've heard of it. I want to. Okay, so very quickly, because I love the history lesson, but I really okay. So we were just on the precipice of you explaining why you
Why I
now.
turned around.
Yeah.
Mm. So the thing is, I mean, look, I thought it was just necessary to sort of explain the mindset a little bit. Is
Yes.
you dream of democracy, and especially if it's spontaneous and uninhibited and direct, and there's a romance of protest and there's a romance of revolution, and it's all about this ecstatic moment where everyone comes together and throws down their shackles and throws all of the nasty people on top who are holding us back from loving one another as brothers, because all human beings are good by nature, and rainbows will burst out of everyone's assholes for days on end all over the country.
Humans are not good by nature.
No, of course, it doesn't happen like that. And the thing is, I had to see it firsthand. So I was at UCT in 2015, and a lot of my friends were involved in the Rhodes Must Fall movement. And I dipped out for health reasons from the social scene for a bit. And I noticed almost everyone who had something that took them out of the social scene that year or the previous year, they didn't go along with the crowd, but everyone who was in it was just hypnotized. It was the strangest thing. But I went along with it because I was like, no, I have principles, and I'm, there's something that says, no, there's something wrong with this, but I'm going to ignore that feeling, because actually. And what convinced me to join was this, because I was thinking the statue, there's something off, like that's not actually helping anything. But I worked on a farm before I went to UCT to study. I did manual labor out there in Northwest Province. And over there, like at the time, 10 years ago, it was still, I don't know what it's like now, but it was still then like kind of segregated, really. And I don't mean just like white people hanging out together, black people hanging out together. I mean, it was like, I was given a job at the bar because the white people there didn't want to be served by a black barman.
Oh, okay.
You see what I mean? So, it's that kind of vibe. But you'd meet black people down there who were real Uncle Toms, not like the sort of like, haha, you support the wrong political party kind of Uncle Tom, but real deal. Try and have an argument about them that the two of you are equal. They will argue back. So. Yeah, there's not much. Where did I put? Oh, bugger! My glasses on the other end of the room. I'm going to be extraordinarily uncouth for a minute.
That's right.
So
Uncouth. Jeez. You always use such elegant words, Rob. I love it. Anyway, I bequeath unto you. Continue.
Unto unto is such an archaic word. No, but where the fuck was I?
What did you call me? A terrorist? What?
Oh shit! Well, no, you never know. Egyptians abroad. No, what was I talking about?
Roads must fall.
Yeah, roads must fall in the countryside. So I met a lot of these like black people who really like self-hatred. So on campus, when I saw people standing up, I sort of thought about it, and there was a point where I said, well, actually it's good, because they were also like Zuma at the time had this big thing about clever blacks. And you know the word clever is like it's a thief.
I didn't know that.
Like imagine in your head that it's spelled Kleva.
Okay, that's thief.
Yeah, that's like, you know, like a burglar, a gangster, you know, he's a clever, right? So when he called like when he called black liberals clever blacks, he's like making an extraordinary complex wordplay where he's associating them with like criminality, organized crime, as well as white institutions. So it's that whole thing where he's playing with sort of an intellectual as being some, because he always said that, you know, like, well, I'm not afraid of whites because I didn't study in the institution, so I'm not brainwashed. So that was his whole thing. So there was an anti-intellectualism in the air, and I'd met black people who really like had the self-hatred. So when I saw this, I thought, well, maybe they need this pride. Maybe they need something to say, you know, I'm proud to be black and I'm proud to be an intellectual. And I thought, well, these can only be wholesome.
Yeah.
It can only have a wholesome effect. And then the thing is that the movement grew so rapidly and it was so popular and it attracted so many people of very different political views who all, well, in my mind, different political views, but from where I'm standing now, they're all kind of the same thing. It's kind of like, you know, a wine connoisseur. You can become a mayonnaise connoisseur if you eat enough mayonnaise. So that's kind of like with communism. I mean, there's like a million shades of red, but it's all fucking red.
Yeah.
Anyway, when after the statue came down, there were like some major changes that happened in the movement. Like I'd started to hear like voices on the edge that were talking about segregation and using Steve Biko to justify it. And there were people who were quoting France Fanon and talking about, we need, violence as a liberatory mechanism to unite the people against the settlers. And I was just like, all of these little things. And then the really sort of hard-edged woke stuff that I always thought, that it would be because I was sort of vaguely aware of these ideas, but because you hear them in class. But you think, oh, well, there's a sensible way to apply them. You think like, well, white privilege, it makes sense. We are better off because of apartheid and all this. But the way it gets employed in the real is absolutely totalitarian, unforgiving, inhumane. You will listen to us or you will be burnt in the pit of hell. And I was at the last ever meeting in UCT where white people were allowed to participate in 2015. They allowed us back to protest in 2016 because they needed the numbers because we were like half the university, right? But
wait a second. So you went to a meeting or meetings were had where they actually said
I was
like
in the meetings. I helped. No, dude, I helped with like I went along with like occupying the buildings and.
But isn't that discrimination though? Like you said now, like, oh, I was allowed to come, like as if like people were like, oh, only blacks are allowed in this meeting.
It became like that afterwards. After the statue came down, there was a moment where everyone was like, well, what do we really mean? We're not just about the statue. We're about more than this,
So there is discrimination happening.
Well, not yet. At that point, it was sort of there was a lot of anti-white racism, but it sort of still felt like it was not in the core because there were people who were clearly natural leaders who'd been floating to the top and done most of the talking and done most of the organizing, and dominating the conversations.
Jeez.
And I sort of stuck my hand up at this last meeting. I said, this whole flat leaderless sort of thing where we're all open, democratic, anarchist, whatever. I do like it, but I think, we have the media on us, and if we're going to manage perspectives, we need someone who's going to be the person to go to for the media to talk to, so you can manage the media, and maybe even a treasurer so that you can manage funds and get donations. And like even this kind of minimal shit. The next person who spoke, I can't remember his name, but he wouldn't address me directly. He didn't even make eye contact with me. He just stood up and said, I think we shouldn't be dictated to by outsiders. I was like, bruh, like I've given money to you. I've I've helped you occupy this building, like it's not much. It's not much, but it's not like I was like an outsider. I was there. So anyway, the next thing I knew, white people were not allowed at the meeting. And they used Steve Biko to justify it because he says a whole bunch of things. And I was a little perturbed because this is segregation, and segregation is an obviously deep, unforgivable moral wrong.
Yeah.
And so I started ruminating on this. And there was a blog at the time that everyone was reading called Africa is a Country. And there was an article that appeared in Africa as a Country about Beethoven. And it was being shared about by a lot of people. And I thought, okay, that's weird. Why are they interested in Beethoven? So I click on it, and Beethoven is apparently black. And I thought, okay.
I remember that.
No,
I remember that.
Then I was like, yeah, okay. So then I thought, okay, but what's their reasoning? So I read the whole article, and the reasoning was really weird and specific. And this is what triggered me, because I knew about like the Nazis using like trying to rewrite history, that like Jesus was an Aryan and Caesar was secretly a German, and all of this kind of shit, right? So I read through.
The Romans did the same thing. The Romans did the same thing to the Egyptians.
Did they?
Yeah, they
have a look at that.
They rewrote and tried to take down, much like we're seeing today, with statues being taken down. The Romans tried to take down temples, rewrite. They pasted over the hieroglyphs with their own stories and stuff like that. Like it's yeah, you still see it today in Alexandria.
Really?
Yeah.
No shit.
Mm-hmm.
I must definitely. That sounds like a very interesting avenue. I've never. I know that I have to eventually get into Egypt, but Egypt's history is too intimidating. I just have no. It's just like I have no handle on it. It's way too big, so I've just like left it alone there.
I only found that out because like I went on a school trip to Alexandria, and that Alexandria has a lot of Roman influence, and we were taken to this area where there used to be a temple, and you could see the paintings of the Romans, and then eventually it's like broken off, and then right underneath you can see the hieroglyphs. And you can see like that they tried to just rewrite everything and take down temples and
Oh shit! Conquering armies and iconoclasm, eh?
Mm-hmm. Anyway,
and that's where all of this shit began. Iconoclasm.
Yep.
Destroying statues. So when I was in the middle of all of this, and this article came out, and they were arguing. Their argument was specifically because like a white person couldn't have had that sensibility for rhythm. But like the levels of removal from like reasonable inference were incredible stretches. But what really struck me was that they didn't even manage to argue that Beethoven had a black parent or that he was adopted or anything like that. They claimed it was the case. But what was really weird is that their argument included the fact that he was raised from infancy by white fucking Germans. Or strictly speaking, white Dutch people, but because his family were Dutch immigrants to Austria, but so the Dutch can claim another one. But he, where was I? Yeah, so that. But they seem to be inferring that it was genetic and that only the black genes were capable of producing true genius. And I was sort of looking at this, and so I contacted all of my radical friends on Facebook and tagged them and made this long post and said, hey guys, I'm very worried about the kind of ideas that we see. And, I just think this kind of racial essentialism is probably something we should keep an eye on. And just like generally, I'm concerned. And everyone just reacted with like cry laughing emojis, like, fuck Rob, you're insane. And like, here comes the swart gevaar.
What?
And all of this shit.
Well, to
And
be
I was
fair,
just,
you admitted it yourself now that you messaged all your radical friends. I mean,
I was a radical. I thought everyone was in the same boat. Like we were doing it because we were good-hearted and we cared about people. But I since learned that I was not examining these people's characters, and they were actually, for the most part, extremely spiteful, vain, shallow, bitter, and hateful people. And the number of people who I am still in contact from those days with is extremely small. And I used to be a very sociable, very outgoing man. Yeah, I was a real party animal. But I mean, you wouldn't think of it now, where I'm extremely bookish and straight edged. But yeah, I'm in contact with very few of them still. But
so you were basically
yeah,
outcasted because you
oh yeah,
you had an
but
opinion.
it was next level. Like some of the people that I met then like joined paramilitary groups. They joined like the PAC, and look, there's all kinds of shenanigans. I don't know where to start with all of the things. But the thing about me, the thing that turned me around, was recognizing that in that moment, what happened in the next months, I said, well, maybe in 10 years, if we allow this seed to grow, we'll see something like Black National Socialism. It took less than a month. And people were chanting openly in massive crowds, one settler, one bullet, Dabula Ibunu, all of this kind of stuff. And there's nothing wrong with it. Everyone pretended this was like, they'd either pretend to your face that it wasn't happening while you could hear it. They'd tell you, what? Nothing. It was like, there's the most insane, everyone had lost their fucking minds. And we had professors who were openly calling for murdering their colleagues if they didn't stand on the right side of the history, like Loazi Lushaba. Says, well, strictly speaking, his words were, we have your names, and if you are not on our side of history, we are going to come and get you if you're not on the right side of history. And it was absolute nuts. You watched across the universities all over the country as admin staff and students were chased around with clubs and buckwhips. They burned libraries. They locked people into buildings and tried to burn them alive. Dragged reluctant students out of dormitories and beat them. In my university, it was much less violent, but it was much more sinister. So every university had their own character. So UCT, I think sinister is the right word for them, because almost everyone was, the language they used was the most bloodthirsty, genocidal psychopathy you ever come across.
Wow.
And it was open. And it was, I mean, like, there was no nuance to it whatsoever. It was like, we don't need to just kill you because, you're in the way and we need your stuff. We need to kill you in order to empower ourselves spiritually. I mean, it was on that level, and completely open. I don't think anyone who pretends that this was not open and in the public is lying, because it was really blatant. It even managed to hit the news lines. You got people like, Wits, the famous Mcebo Dlamini, who said, well, Hitler's great and he should be a model. That on their SRC website, they did an interview with him that they've since taken down, that I remember from back in the day. They asked him, well, what about this Hitler stuff? And he says, well, look, he was an enemy. The white people consider him evil, therefore he's good. And I think that all of his models for society are good. We should have a youth movement that is militaristic and against minorities. We should be jingoistic. And he admires himself because he's from Swaziland. And he says, how amazing. A man who comes from a neighboring country to rule, Germany. This kind of thing. And everyone, when he was stripped of his presidency at SRC, when he was expelled, everyone in UCT protested in solidarity. absolutely extraordinary. And when Masetlole Mlando of that university came out and said, I was taught by his thesis supervisor, Thivan Reddy, who came up with who sort of nursed this idea of it's not original, but he's sort of the biggest scholar of this at the moment, the biggest promoter of this idea that apartheid was a special form of colonialism, and that white people are therefore in no way native to Africa, and not even the Afrikaans can be considered native to South Africa, and they don't belong here. And they're a permanent immigrant category. But black people are not, because the borders are artificial and imposed by coloniality. So, so this guy, the first essay he gives to me in my class is something by a woman called Susan Buck Morse, and it argues that the epitome of revolutionary teleology is Haiti. And in Haiti, of course, is the only successful genocide in world that we know of in modern history.
Yeah.
Of blacks against whites. And so he holds this up, and when as like, well, this is the ideal. This is where history is tending towards, and we must go there. And the thesis that Masetlole Mlando produced under him argued that the solution to the settler colonial question was unrestricted revolutionary violence. In other words, a genocide. And he signed off his thesis with one settler, one bullet. Now, he puts this on Twitter, and the VC of now you'd think he's just another student, So, but he's a personal acquaintance of the Vice Chancellor Mamakgedi Bakeng, and she followed him and went and retweeted this and said, "Wonderful, excellent, congratulations! What a stellar performance!" And of course, then. Yeah, she promotes this openly. I mean, and now she's being taken out of the vice chancellorship because she's not radical enough.
Wow.
So you've got to understand, UCT is the most evil institution, education institution on the planet.
All right, now tomorrow I'm going to be cancelled. Thanks, Rob. Tomorrow I'm not going to have a YouTube channel after that.
Completely. Everyone's still there. No, I'm telling you right now. There are very few people left in UCT who I have any respect for. Very few. Mm. And these are a small number of academics who managed to hold out and not go along with the Cultural Revolution over there. But the kind of shenanigans that happen, I have no idea. And it's all like this slow, quiet, sinister backstabbing stuff and purging of people who disagree from departments, so that economic history now only has Marxists. Mm. That kind of thing. But the reason this all turned me around is because what I looked at this as, the whole Rome must fall thing, was it was a spontaneous, popular outburst of democratic feeling, addressing the issues of the downtrodden. And what I had realized is that when you have unrestricted, sort of unstructured development of new ideas which rejects everything that exists, what rises into its place is whatever is the most brutal and radical, because they define themselves by two things primarily. We are pro-black and we are radical. And what is the most radical way to be pro-black? Well, it's to be for white genocide. And look, people are going to fudge the game. Every single newspaper that reported on this stuff, they came down and said how wonderful, it's just like 1976. This is, everyone like clamoring for freedom. And that's the point when you really saw the journalists turn around, because the ones that didn't go along with the narrative and went, maybe, I don't know, this doesn't look so good, they were chastised absolutely ruthlessly. Yeah. And so after that, you saw this major shift in the tone of journalism in South Africa during the Fees Must Fall, because it ballooned into a national thing. Rhodes Must Fall was just UCT. But without it, Fees Must Fall could not have existed. And Fees Must Fall became a national level thing. And because it was so divisive, it attracted schisms within the ANC. And I had a friend of mine who liked running his mouth, who was a member of the ANC Youth League. And he liked me because he thought I was going to be his pet white left-wing theorist who is going to legitimize the ANC and so on and so forth.
Well, thank goodness you did not take that offer.
No, I mean, the thing is, for a long time I thought that at least he was still a friend, but I realized over time that he was actually quite a spiteful and bigoted little man. And it was what he let slip. I remember he was like, he didn't know who to vote for in the 2017 internal election, whether it was Zuma or Ramaphosa. And I said, look, dude, pick a side, because if you don't pick a side, everything's good. Still at the time when, we thought that Ramaphosa would be a different kettle of fish, because we hadn't read his life history.
Yeah.
We just look at the headlines.
Exactly.
So, I don't know. It was a thing where I sort of said pick a side, and he refused to pick a side because he was a coward. He still is a coward. He never, like most ANC members, absolutely gutless cowards. I mean, not the old struggle stalwarts. Whatever you can say about them, you can't call them cowards. But the new generation are just Anyway, he was in Bladen Zimande's office. He had an internship there. And one of the things he let slip was that the people over there, in order to embarrass Blade, were pouring millions of rands into the student movements. Of course, we know other people were also donating to the student movements, including, Open Society Foundation. But I mean, the problem with Open Society Foundation is there's like this complete naivete in their system. Like, the activists over there, they're foreigners mostly, and they come down to South Africa and they say, well, how can we help with making things progress and, helping people get over the legacy of apartheid? And it's very sort of, they don't know what's really going on under the surface. And to be frank, none of us really did at the time either.
Yeah.
So I can't really blame them for it. But the guys in the ANC, they were definitely up to shenanigans. And that money in UCT, it went straight into the PAC, which relaunched POCO, which is their armed wing. And so several students from our got to get basic bush training.
Wow. So they
firearms and shenanigans, yeah.
Trained them for war, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how serious the training is. I mean, it's like, you don't know if they're any good, because it's all. I mean, the PAC at the time is like, they had two people who were claiming they were the true leader of the PAC, and because there's a law inside the PAC, you cannot question your commander. There's no way for the internal party mechanisms to resolve it. The two just have to make friends, or, So.
Wow.
So the thing is, I saw what I thought was the epitome of goodness and hope in humanity transformed into the deepest form of hell and evil that I could possibly imagine. Everything that I'd been taught to despise and fear and that I thought, well, we've learned from the past. There's no way anyone's going to repeat it. And the thing is, this sent me on like a whole long thing where I started investigating, well, where did they get their ideas from? So read all of that. Why do people react this way? Read all of the psychology on radicalization. Did my thesis that year on terrorist radicalization, so I could look into all of that literature and make it into something productive. And I spent a lot of time going back through the genealogy of ideas and looking at human behavior and gradually getting this closer and closer picture of how group dynamics work, how hierarchy and morality is carried through society, and what ideology is. And revisiting elements of South African history that are taken for granted and aren't looked at with the correct lens. And Western history, which is totally distorted by, sort of Cold War memories and the takeover of the institutions by the left. And then you start getting into things like questioning the media because you see how badly people misrepresent things, and everything gradually falls apart, and you have to find somewhere else to base your whole moral outlook on life on. And I think what you have to develop if you're going to ever get your shit together, you have to develop a tragic sense of life. I mean, this is something that Douglas Murray picks up on. He quotes there's a Basque poet called Miguel Unamuno. Fairly easy to find online because I think the copyright's expired on it. It's called The Tragic Sense of Life. But it's not just that. I mean, if you don't have a tragic sense of life, you have a utopian sense of life, because life does contain suffering, and the idea that you're constantly trending towards utopia, or that you can achieve utopia by design, it's nonsense. It's just clear nonsense. And if you believe that whatever political program you're putting together, whether it's for nationalism, or whether it's this liberal progress, or whether it's communism or socialism, whether by reform or revolution, you've got to know that whatever you make, the best that it can be is still going to be life, and life is still going to be fraught with all kinds of boredom and tragedy. And I think the best you can hope for is a boring world, really.
Gosh, I hope not. I don't want a boring world.
Well, what would you prefer? I mean, the Chinese Revolution was pretty exciting, but I don't think you'd enjoy it.
No. No, of course not. Yeah, this story is. I mean, I don't blame you. It's something like that takes that really shakes your ideologies and makes you question your world. And I don't.
But I mean, look, let's be frank. It is kind of tame. It's not like I got ganged up and chopped to bits or anything. Look, I mean, I got death threats, the usual thing, and they're a bit different, face to face than they are online.
Yeah,
I've got to
true.
admit.
Yeah.
And there was one time that it happened in front of my family at my house, so that kind of stuck with me a bit.
Oh wow. What happened? Like, did they, without going into too much detail, but they didn't beat you, did they?
No, it wasn't serious. It's not like I was a threat to these people. It was like it's like, light bullying with yes, but we have access to firearms,
Okay.
that kind of thing.
Yeah. Jeez, man. Wow. Yeah, well, if I was in your situation, I would have reacted the exact same way. Like,
no, dude, for years I was way too I was so paranoid and bitter and vengeful that I don't think that I didn't even start writing my blog until I got over that. So I only started writing last year. Because I had too many sort of like nasty, black vengeful emotions inside me.
It's the same. It's the same reason why. Sorry, it's the same reason why I don't do jokes about Egypt yet. Because I was also there was a dark time in Egypt for me.
Yes.
And everyone, like, I was bullied horribly, and my close friends that I speak to, they say, like, well, maybe you should talk about that stuff in your comedy, and I'm like, I know that comedy, some of the best comedy comes from dark places, but for me, much like you just said now with your blog, like it's still, it's not easy. I'll just put it that way. It's very difficult to find.
You can't let that stuff out there because you have to digest it first.
Yeah, exactly.
Otherwise you just let that shit poison everything you write, and the more you lean into it, the more it sort of transforms you into a monster. And I mean, look, it's not like I don't. Once your heart goes there, you know that you're forever capable of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. You are forever capable of that kind of thing.
Absolutely. All right, so we have just over 6 minutes ish. I will go just a tad bit over because I want to address some of the comments that came in, but I want to just quickly say that because this is again the lapse of the life of a lapsed communist, and I wanted Rob to explain, why he was like radical, but then he changed, and fascinating story. Mine is not so exciting. I basically I was misled. I was also with the ideas of democracy and people's rights and stuff like that, and I was misled horribly by the media, And then I started to see how the media manipulates certain things. And then I was like, well, I used to trust CNN. I used to trust all these big media corporations because they used to, like, they were journalists. They used to tell the truth, or at least look for the truth, which nowadays they're not.
That romantic story.
I know, I
You see,
know.
like, Newsroom with like Jeff what's his
Oh,
name?
it's
Jeff
brilliant,
Daniels.
though. It's brilliant. It's so good. His monologue about America was like spot on.
Oh, but that's such lefty nonsense. Like, if the look, America's got their problems, but those aren't the exact problems that they have.
Yeah, but I mean, it was still good. I think it was something that,
Yeah.
for its time, it was something that I think Americans needed to hear. And I enjoyed the newsroom, but then again, like like I said,
Because it was a great program.
It
It was
was a
great
great program.
propaganda.
It
Great
was.
ideological propaganda.
And
Listen to the cathedral. Do not disobey. Do not doubt.
exactly. But before all of this, like before, like when I was watching that stuff, and now I kind of see it. Now I see it more because I'm looking at it from a different lens, and I question everything now. Like I question everything. Even a headline that I see today, I'll question it. I'll be like, I'll read it, and I'll question it. And once I started questioning everything, I started to realize like, whoa, there's like a bigger picture happening here. This is here. Like even the question about genocide, with the attack on farmers and stuff like that. I mean, no disrespect. There's definitely a problem in South Africa that needs to be addressed with the farm murders and farm attacks and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Genocide, though, I'm trying to research that. I'm trying to figure that out, and that
Yeah.
I'm just explaining the way my mind works at the moment. Is I question everything.
Because you're hearing those things. You're hearing those slogans now. You're hearing,
Yeah, exactly.
People calling for that. But there's more subtle ways that people do it. Like and the ANC's been playing with this a lot, where they'll name places that are sort of sacred to Afrikaans history after people who called for the slaughter of white people.
Yeah. But that's the thing, like
over and over, they do that. Like they're doing that with what's that town's name? It's in the Free State or something. And like Winnie Mandela never even has visited there. It's got some name like Brandfontein or Brentford or something like that. And they're naming it after Winnie Mandela. And there was a thing where there's a ship called SAS Johanna van den Berg or something. I can't remember. But she was a woman who was stabbed to death with assegais, during before the Battle of Blood River, the slaughter at Vienna, and so they renamed the ship the SAS Assegai.
You see, like that kind of stuff.
Here's a really good one. So you know why the whole Battle of Blood River and why that thing's fucking harsh and everything.
Yeah.
Cyril Ramaphosa has a speech during the first few months of his presidency where he says that Dangane was a national hero.
I must look that up. Not that I'm doubting you. I must. Like I said, I'm doing research. So to my point, like when I came to South Africa, let me start from here. So in Egypt, I was going through a tough time. And I was very much into politics because of the tough time I was having. And then I moved here, and I was like, I'm not gonna like get into politics here. I want to just be a kid, live my life. It's a new country, make friends. I actually thought people hated Americans when I moved here because that's how traumatized I was from Egypt. I thought the whole world hated Americans, and that I was probably going to be treated the same way. And to my pleasant surprise, I wasn't. Yes, there are people that don't like Americans and stuff like that, but not on the level that I was treated in Egypt. And so anyway, my life goes on. I stay away from politics, and only in the past 2-3 years did I start getting back into it because I started to notice the failures of the ANC. And then when I started to get back onto that bandwagon, that's when I started to realize, like, oh, wait a second. My ideologies don't really align with lefties. They actually align with, if you have to put a label on it, centrist leaning right. And then lockdown happens. I get more, I do more research, and then I start, because I was towing the line. You know, I wasn't necessarily like you in the sense of like, well, actually, no. Just like you, when you wanted to speak out for what you believe in and call someone out, I kind of did the same thing. And yeah, I also got interesting
There's
messages
something
and
it's awfully demonic. It's the reactions are really demonic. There's something absolutely bizarre about the left that I absolutely can't.
because they
It's
preach
it's
tolerance, but they don't know what that means. They really don't.
no, they don't preach tolerance.
Some of them do. You always see them on
Yeah,
Twitter saying like, "Oh, we must be tolerant of this person. We must be tolerant of that group. We must be tolerant towards this
no,
one."
acceptance. They preach acceptance, and they have a very hard line between shit they accept and shit they don't accept.
Yeah.
And for some people, the thing that they don't accept is continued existence, which is why every communist regime has very, very big grave sites.
Well, the
But I mean,
ANC just made like 1 million grave sites. I wonder what that's going to be for.
oh no, I don't think on that level. I don't think they're that competent. But I think, uh, but I think the thing is, once you look at the effects of South Africa's economic policies and the effect of their education policies and the effect of the way that the party behaves, which is a typical characteristic of Marxist political parties. Once you've sort of had a look at those things, it's very, very hard to continue to believe in them unless you have this kind of like real cognitive dissonance that the left has, where they
Mm.
believe that, well, if we could just get rid of the corruption, it would totally work. Not realizing, of course, that everywhere it happens, it absolutely magnifies corruption because it places the people who are key decision makers for the getting shit done that allows people to survive, which is economics,
Hmm.
in the hands of a small number of gatekeepers.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. It's that's yeah. You hit the nail on the head there. So yeah, like that was my journey anyway. I didn't. I don't know. The moment I
Yeah.
started to feel like, oh, I started to feel that pressure of you can't say this, you can't say that, and I'm like, but what I'm saying isn't that bad. No, 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 but you just can't say it.
Yeah.
I was like, no, screw that. I'm a comedian. I can say whatever I want. I'm an artist. I'm also an individual. I have my own thoughts, my own beliefs, my own ideologies. I'm not going to let you just pour your ridiculous ideologies onto me, which make no sense whatsoever. So I am going to speak out. I'm going to speak. The more they tell me to shut up, the more I'm like, I'm speaking even louder. Which, yeah. So they just
Yeah.
pushed me
Yeah.
away,
Absolutely.
basically.
But that's kind of the thing, and I think this is a point that I like to try and hammer home for a lot of people is ideology and morality are not the same thing. But ideology tries to act like morality.
That's true.
So ideology is a set of norms and beliefs that are constructed with the intention of justifying a political program and providing support for it. So you assemble all of these slogans and attitudes and arguments and norms about what's right and wrong and allowable and not allowable, and it all behaves like morality because we understand morality to be stuff that we are and are not allowed to do. And it has a pernicious effect like that because it sort of seeps in everywhere, and
Yeah.
it makes you it creates hierarchies of prestige and sucks you into trying to be an admirable person in the name of the ideology. Can I show myself to be more piously adherent to the ideology of this movement?
Mm.
And it's very, very difficult to cultivate something that's wholesome and good that can fit under a simple umbrella.
Yeah.
I think that because doing the right thing is such an enormously more fragile and complex thing than that,
Mm.
an ideology tries to narrow it down so that it can fit into a slogan and fit into a political program and get everyone to do the same thing. And I don't think that's how life works, unfortunately.
No, it's not. Um, Wow. All right. So we've gone a bit over time. As I said, I would spend a little bit more minutes on this. I do want to acknowledge the super chats that came in today. So thank you so much for the super sticker from, I believe it was Rhodesians Will Never Die. I'm just looking for it very quickly. Yes, she gave a 14 Rand super sticker. And she said, pair character turning. Oh, sorry, that's a super sticker. That's not what she said. Sorry. And there was another super sticker from Robin Dandelion. Thank you so much. And yeah, so thank you guys so much for the super sticker. So Rob, I don't know if I should tell you this. They are listening, and people were listening. We had quite an audience tonight, and very much, sympathizing with you and stuff. But there's an interesting conversation happening in the chats.
Oh, do tell.
And there was a comment that said, I hope Joe doesn't read these comments out loud. So,
they're not too spicy, are they?
What's your definition of spicy?
I don't know, anything that could get you banned off YouTube.
Oh no. They're basically saying I'm trying to look for where it started. I don't see, but I saw a comment.
Are they names I'd recognize?
Yes. Oh yes, here we go. Okay, no wait, that's regarding something else. Here we go. Eleutheria is saying Rob is sexier with glasses.
It's funny she says that. I was looking at there was there's a group chat I was on, and someone in the group chat shared a link to that Scottish lass with the long red hair and the enormous breasts who uses her physical appearance to shill for communism.
I think so. Yes, I think I've seen those. Yeah.
Okay. You've seen those? Yes.
No.
So,
boy.
I don't know what her name is, but I was sort of thinking, well, why aren't there more men getting ripped and using their physical appearance to sell non-communism or something a bit more healthy?
Because it gets labeled as racist, that's why.
Oh yes. You could easily be labeled a fascist for admiring the male form.
Exactly. And then Gentle Inflatable saying, any man with a beautiful personality is sexy. I'm not sure if she was talking about me, you, or both of us. And yeah, that's where she says, I hope Joe and Rob don't read these comments.
Oh.
But no, they're everyone enjoying the thing. I do want to bring this up as well. Welcome Lavanya Bota. Sorry, I probably messed up that name. One thing to be pointed out is that these are factions and not the majority of South Africa. I'll comment on that, and I'll say I do think that. Yeah, I do think that it is a faction. That it's not a majority in South Africa. I think most South Africans, if not all of them, just want to live good lives, provide for their family. They want opportunity to work their way up in society, become middle class, provide for their future children, grandchildren. We all want that, and just live our lives and be kind to one another, and live in what was sold to us as a rainbow nation. The question is, how do we get there? Will it ever happen? Maybe we did things the wrong way in the past. But I do agree with that statement that it is just factions. How do you feel about it?
The problem is that in any society, ordinary people don't make the rules.
That's true.
And it's the elites that drive everything.
Yeah.
And you can see this in social media as well. You've got to think of society a lot like social media. But but with more formal characteristics. Yeah. So networks govern everything, and they always have. And if you can think of the state as being like this massive, the Twitter account that has the most followers, so that you think of like hierarchies as being massive nodes in the network. And the elites are at the centers of these connective networks that are connected to all of the most important networks. And so all of the people in the universities and all the people in the civil services and all the people in the ruling party, they form a community. They form a community of people who agree on a certain set of general principles that are allowed and not allowed within their social circles. And they define what is going to happen.
Yep.
They define government policy. And the ordinary people, you can vote every few years, but you don't have an awful lot of input. And the other problem is that the vast majority of society have completely internalized socialist ideology. They believe they're entitled to part of everybody else's wealth, whether in the form of welfare or physical property. And they don't believe that any minority group has a right to have their own culture represented in any institutions. That's that. Even by very moderate people, they think that it's divisive to have, Afrikaans taught anywhere. So, and I mean, look, you can have the conversations, and they'll be as welcoming to you as anyone else. And it's not always a racist position. It's literally just they pick this thing up like a spore on the wind, and it lands in their brain, and it's like, okay, well, that's a good idea. And it's because it's justified by certain things that people hold at a fundamental level: democracy, equality, unity. Unity is a big thing here in Africa, and once you understand how that word unity is used here in South Africa, it'll really change. It'll make a lot of things make sense.
Yeah. I'm going to cut it there because we can go on and on. Rob, I always enjoy your conversations, not just with you, like one-on-one, but also when I watch you on other interviews. I think you're doing
thanks, man.
Amazing work, and you have a brilliant mind. So please, ladies and gentlemen, for those of you who haven't yet, Rob's YouTube channel is in the description below, the link to his YouTube channel. Yeah. Please go give it a subscribe. He does amazing work, and his next video is going to drop soon. Herman Ruiz giving a 35 Rand super chat. Thank you, Herman, saying spicy. And Yanni Vanderveld also giving a 35 Rand super chat. Thank you. He says, Mamma mia, that's a spicy meat. Oh, I gotta say it with an Italian accent. Mamma mia, that's a spicy meatball. Not that he asked me to. I'm just when I was reading it, I was like, oh, that voice was in my head. All right, so once again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. This was a fascinating story and some interesting facts that were given. Life as a lapsed communist. There you go. Why we left the left. So yeah, I hope you guys found it fascinating and interesting. Please share, please subscribe to my channel if you're new to it. Rob, do you have any final words for the people watching?
I don't know. Try and stay calm, I guess. That's always good. Yeah. Try and stay calm.
Cool. I'll probably have Rob back again soon. We'll find a topic to discuss. Maybe we'll take this conversation further. We'll see. But ladies and gentlemen, I'll be back tomorrow night with more shows for you, more content coming your way. So please stay safe until then. And if I don't see you tomorrow night, I'll see you when I see you. But until then, keep safe, be kind to one another, and I'll see you at the next one. Cheers. Hey guys, so if you enjoyed the show, please consider giving it a like and a share. Don't forget to subscribe as well if you're new to my channel. And if you really enjoyed the content, feel free to join and become a member. Don't forget about my fight against cancel culture. That's in the link in the description below. Support my fight against cancel culture. Go to that link and all the information is there. Other than that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching.